Hi, I'm Nicola Mackenzie, founder and mortgage advisor here at DM Mortgages, and in today's video I will be explaining how to understand and interpret the information in your credit report, which is really important if you're considering applying for a mortgage or a remortgage in the near future. So stay tuned. Now, before we get into the content of today's video, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss any more property, mortgage and finance related videos. Now, to show your support for this channel, when the time comes for you to consider your mortgage or remortgage options, we want you to head over to our website, which is dm.mortgage, and book in for a free of charge mortgage appointment with a member of our fully qualified mortgage advice team. But let's get into today's video. Now, I've done this video, guys, because a lot of people make the mistake of either not checking their credit file at all or only focusing on their credit score because they think that that's the only thing that the lender's really going to take into account. Now, the reason why focusing on only the score is by far not the most reliable way to interpret your credit file is because there is no single credit score that lenders will adhere to. So most lenders and organisations, when they're assessing your credit file, will utilise their own scorecard when they're making lending decisions, and not those that are set by the credit reference agencies themselves. So whilst, yes, the credit score is important because it tells you, what kind of category you're in, excellent, good, poor, fair, etc. But ultimately it doesn't tell us the whole story. And for this reason, that's why I always recommend obtaining and checking your credit file when you are thinking about applying for a mortgage or a remortgage in the future. Now, where you obtain that credit file from, we would strongly recommend that you use something called Checkmyfile.com. Don't worry, I will put links to Checkmyfile.com in the description below. Now, the reason that we generally recommend Checkmyfile.com is because it's by far the most user or reader friendly credit file that you can access. But not only that, Checkmyfile.com pulls all of the information from the three major credit reference agencies, which are Equifax, Experian and TransUnion, and they compile that information into one report. Now, when you go for a mortgage, it's likely that the mortgage lender that you'll be applying to will use one of those three credit reference agencies to check your credit file, or they may even use a combination of 2 out of the 3, for example. Now, the other reason why I recommend Checkmyfile.com is because the information that one of those reference agencies might hold on you isn't necessarily the same as the next. I've seen clients in the past that have an excellent credit score recorded with one of the reference agencies, but then they've had a default or a poor score with another. So it's really important that checking all three is something that you do. It's crucial to do that so that you can make sure that there isn't any issues across all three of the major credit reference agencies. Now, even though I'll be analysing this report that is from Checkmyfile, the same principle generally applies whether you do get the credit report from any one of the three credit reference agencies. But ultimately, your credit score is a measure of the probability of you defaulting on a credit agreement. And it says here that scores range between 0, which is a high probability, and 1,000, which is a low probability. So an average score, according to Checkmyfile, would be 750 out of 1,000. And they'll also give you a star rating of 1 to 5. So of course, the aim would be 5 stars, but the average rating, according to Checkmyfile, is 3 stars. Now, your credit report is a history of the last 6 years. So that's how far back a credit report will take you. So if we look at the first section of the report is the accounts that you have that are active, okay? So these are any forms of outstanding credit agreements that you have. It will also show credit accounts or current accounts, etc. Now, very useful information because this is going to tell you who the lender is when you open the account, what the current balance on the account is, and what the credit limit, if that applies, is according to that particular creditor. Now, the other bit of useful information that this section would show is If you have had a default registered against you, then it would usually show what the default balance was, when it was satisfied, if it's satisfied, etc. So a default is something that you really want to try and avoid, and it's something that a lender would apply if you've missed generally 3 to 6 payments with a creditor. So the reason you want to avoid a default is because it's going to make it harder for you to borrow money, okay? So if you do miss a payment with a creditor, or you're struggling to keep up with payments, my advice would always be to speak to the creditor. Don't bury your head in the sand, because when you stop communicating with the lender or the creditor, that is when you'll miss further payments, and you will eventually get to the stage where they will apply a default, okay? Whereas if you make an arrangement to pay with that particular creditor and you liaise with them and communicate, then there may be ways to avoid being in that situation. But ultimately, this section's very useful. Now, this section here where you can see the colours, this is again where you can see your payment history with each individual creditor. Very important, useful information. So the key tells us that the green OK means that you've made the payment on time. And that's again why I like Checkmyfile, because it's colour coded. So if you've missed a payment, it will show amber, red when it gets really bad. Green, we want to see greens. That means that everything's on time, okay? So now this brings us down to another credit card. And in this particular case, now we can start to see that there is a number 1. Now, a number 1 indicates that you have missed a payment. Now, if you've missed a payment on one of your bills, the late payment can get reported to the credit reference agencies once generally you've missed that payment by more than 30 days. If you're 30 days past the due date, that's usually when it goes down as a number 1. Now, I wouldn't recommend going past the due date at all, because every lender reports to the credit reference agencies at different times in the month, but generally that's when it tends to get recorded. So guys, now when we look at this part of the report, we can start to see that there are some number 1s appearing, and a number 1, you can see by the key at the bottom, it tells us that the payment was 1 month late or 1 month in arrears. Now you can see here that there are 3 consecutive number 1s. So what that tells us is that the initial payment was more than a month late, so that payment was missed. But then it looks like the payments then started, the borrower then started making the payments, but they were only making 1 payment. So it still gets recorded on the credit file as a month in arrears, because you're still behind by 1 month. You need to catch up on the month that you originally missed to avoid that number 1 to continue to appear. So effectively, you'd have to at some point make a double payment or make an arrangement to catch up on the payment that you originally missed. And again, that will stop the number 1 showing up, and then that brings us back to green, which is okay. We're back on track. As a viewer of this channel, I assume that you're considering purchasing a property in the near future. So it's important for you to know that DM Mortgages are an award-winning team of fully qualified mortgage brokers that provide advice to clients all over the UK. Now, we spend countless hours making free content for YouTube and other social media platforms to help to give you guys sound and useful information to make sure that you're in the best position to make informed decisions. To support this channel, when the time comes for you to consider your mortgage options, we want you to book a free online mortgage appointment with a member of our fully qualified mortgage advice team. Because without your help and support, keeping this channel going simply isn't possible. Now, we searched thousands of mortgage products from high street and specialist lenders to find the right deal for your circumstances. And we also provide a free will writing service to every DM client. So head over to dm.mortgage and book in for a free mortgage appointment when the time comes. And also make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you find the content useful. But for now, let's get back to the video. Right, now here we can see that we've got number 6s. Number 6, not good. So you get the idea, guys. Again, the key will tell you and help you to interpret the information. So the key here, where we see a red, not good. Number 6, that means that this payment's 6 months late or 6 months in arrears. So you get the idea, 2 months late or 2 months in arrears, you would see a number 2, number 3, and so on and so forth. Now, it's also worth me mentioning actually on this section, you can see now how Equifax have recorded number 6 in terms of the payment history, but Experian and TransUnion have got no account information. So again, that's going back to my earlier point that the information across all 3 credit reference agencies isn't always going to be the same. Hence why Checkmyfile is really good, because again, it's going to tell us what's going on at each credit reference agency. So next we get to the closed payment account history, which again is equally important as the active account history, because just because something's closed, that doesn't mean that the lender is dismissing it when they are looking at your credit file. Again, it's still going to get recorded if it's within the last 6 years. So again, we can see at the key, we've got settled and closed. So an S in the blue circle means that the account was settled and closed, which might be useful to know because it will tell you the month in which you settled it. And the IN on the key means that the account is dormant or inactive. Now, it's also worth mentioning that you may, throughout the report, I haven't got it in this particular example, but you may see the letters AR. That would mean that you've made an arrangement to pay with that particular creditor, or you may see DMP, which is a debt management plan, okay? Now, another part of the key that we've not seen so far is here, which is U, and that means that it's unclassified or recently opened. So again, these are all useful things that you need to take into account. And on this particular page, we can see that again, we've got number 1s and number 2s. So the payment was missed again. Then it looks like this person caught up, but only with 1 payment because it still shows a number 2 the next month. Then they caught up on another payment, but then it's fallen back into arrears, and then a double payment or a triple payment must have been made because here we're back to green. You get the idea. Now, next, I'm going to carry on scrolling down because the next useful section to analyse is the electoral roll page. So the electoral roll is really, really important, and this will tell you if you're on the electoral roll and if that's been reported at each of the credit reference agencies. Now, if you're not on the electoral roll, I would advise you to get on it and become registered to vote, because that can help to improve your credit score. Lenders like to see that you've got a solid address history, okay? Now, it might be that you're showing us on one of the 3 credit reference agencies, but not on all of them. If that's the case, but you actually are on the voters roll, then contact those credit reference agencies and ask them to update their records, okay? Now, the next section on your report will show if you have any financial associations. Very useful once again, because if you apply for credit jointly with another person, it could be a spouse, it could be an ex-partner, then those associations will still remain on your credit file unless the association is no longer valid. Now, if you are financially associated to somebody on your credit file, but all of those joint credit agreements or accounts have been closed, then you need to again contact the credit reference agencies and ask them to update the information, because if that person you're financially associated to has got bad credit, then that can affect your credit as well. So the only one thing I would say though is that if you've got an ex-partner but you are still named jointly on a mortgage or on a bank account or some kind of credit, just because that's your ex-partner, if you're still part of that joint credit agreement, then that is going to have to remain until that credit agreement ends, okay? Now, moving on, the next part of the credit report, so this section as well, actually, the end of the report would also, in this example, I can't exactly show you, but if you had a CCJ, which stands for a county court judgment, which is when someone essentially or a creditor takes court action against you and you don't respond, then that would show up at the back of the report, as well as things like bankruptcies and IVAs. So just make sure that you're not stopping to check the report prematurely, you're checking through it in its entirety, because again, if you've got a CCJ, then you should know about it, because that again can make it harder for you to borrow money, as an IVA or a bankruptcy can as well. Now, when you get to the end of the report, This tells us about your search activity. So this is each time your credit file is searched, it will show as a footprint. Now, some lenders, where you see credit search footprints, this is purely a lender or a creditor making an inquiry rather than carrying out a full search. So inquiries, or soft credit searches as they're commonly referred to as well, do not affect your credit score, okay? They are literally simply footprints. That's someone that's been searching your credit report, okay? And the other thing that I will mention as well is that once you do get an idea of your credit score and file, which is very, very useful information, don't come to any assumptions about how that's going to impact on your ability to get a mortgage, because we see so many different situations in relation to people's credit history, and you know, majority of the time we are able to find people a mortgage even where there are defaults, CCJs, in some instances even where people have, you know, had bankruptcies on their credit file, IVAs. There is still potentially the possibility that you can get a mortgage. So head over to our website, which is dm.mortgage, and there you can book in for a free mortgage appointment with our fully qualified mortgage advice team. And we'll search thousands of mortgage deals to find the one that's right for your circumstances, from high street and specialist lenders. Ultimately, we're here to help you. Now, if you found that video useful, also make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you never miss a future upload. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.